Fast am I. Hello and welcome to this edition of Agenda. I'm Ewan Gorn. There's going to be a changing of the guard at Douglas Council. Whatever the result of Thursday's local elections, 7 experienced councillors have called time on their careers at the Corpy, and with a reduction in the authority's overall numbers from 18 to 12, the arrival of fresh faces is certain. In Douglas South, though, 3 people were elected uncontested. They included the Housing Chair Claire Wells and new councillors Frank Scheungel and Stephen Krellin. One of the new faces in Douglas South is Frank Scheungel, who took part in the 2006 general election where he stood for the constituency for the House of Keys. He works in the e-gaming sector and has been on and off the island living for the last 20 years. I spoke to this new councillor.
Well, my name's Frank Scheungel, as you know, and I have been on and off the Isle of Man for a good 20 years now, over 20 years this year, I think. I have always taken an interest in local politics in one way or another. Some people may remember, in fact, when I started canvassing, before I knew that it was uncontested, I already went out and knocked on some doors, get my signatures, and some people actually remembered me from the 2006 general election because I stood for Douglas South in 2006 for the Keys. That was a great learning experience. Obviously, I didn't win, but it was a good experience and it was worth doing. After that, I concentrated on my career. I work in e-gaming. At the moment, I'm the managing director of an Isle of Man licensed e-gaming company. This has been my career for almost as long as I've been here. And it's, of course, a very strong part of the Manx economy. I have worked here. I have also worked around the world. I've worked in Manila for Manx companies because there's a very strong connection between the Isle of Man and the Philippines in the gaming space. I've worked in other countries, in Greece and Montenegro, and then moved back here, always in gaming in some sort of capacity. When I came back here, I still had this interest in local politics and in making the place a better place if I can. The one thing I never like is when people, complain about the place from the sidelines, but they're never willing to do anything about it. So I knew a couple of the other councillors and chatted with them on and off for the last year probably. Never really made a decision to really commit to the election, but then just a few days before the deadline actually decided, okay, it's now or never, let's try this, let's try local politics. I did think about the nationals, but because of my work, I just would not have the time and I don't want to give up my career. I do think there is time to do something on a local level. So I put in my paperwork. I actually, funny side story, I went knocking on doors, already ordered a lot of leaflets, thinking it would be a contested election because Monday evening, 5 p.m., when we all put our paperwork in at Douglas Town Hall, there were 4 candidates. So it was declared it would be a contested election. So Tuesday morning, being the good organized German that I am, I already put in an order for around about 5,000 leaflets. And then 2 hours later, I go to the town hall at 2 p.m. for the deadline to objections and withdrawals. And the officer there gives me a letter and says, "Congratulations, you're elected." There was been a withdrawal. So,
Did you get to cancel the order? Or
yes, I actually meant. I ended up with 500 that already been printed. So if somebody out there has a bird cage or a hamster cage that you need paper for, please get in touch. The majority I managed to cancel. So.
Brilliant. Well, we'll ask you about some of your policies then. You said you wanted to get involved. You wanted to sort of make a difference rather than shout from the sidelines. What areas are you looking at through the council where you'd like to make an impact?
Well, I think we have a very unique opportunity at the moment. The next council, we're down from 18 to 12. So it's a smaller council. It's hopefully a more dynamic setup. But also we're going to have a lot of new faces. Of course, a lot of the people that have been there for a long time are retiring, not standing anymore. So there we already have an opportunity to maybe try new things. I do like the ideas of some of the other councillors that I spoke to. Even though I'm a petrol head, if you want to call me that, I do, in my spare time, I write for a motoring magazine. I have my own local motoring website that I try as a little hobby. I do also like green subjects, topics, and I think it's important that we look after the place we live in. So I think you will find me very much liking green topics and sort of that we look after Douglas, keep it clean, keep it sustainable. But I also will always be on the side of car drivers and of motorists. And there's going to be a lot of change for car drivers in the next few years as we move towards electrification and changes in the way we move and changes in mobility. So there's going to be a lot of things we can do there. And I'm just basically looking forward to working with the others and see what there is. There are some priorities, of course. Housing always comes up. And there are some ideas from the other councillors I've seen that I'm interested to look at. At the start, because I'm the new kid on the block, I'm just interested in listening to everyone and understanding what everyone does and wants to do and get a picture of what's actually going on and what's actually possible. The worst thing you can do is just walk in and say, I'm going to change X, Y, Z, if you cannot actually change it.
So you are aware that local authorities, of course, your remit's going to be different to a national MHK, what you can do.
Yeah, but you can still try some things within your city and then, affect the wider area. But for example, what we can look at is all the state of buildings in Douglas. There's still too many derelict buildings. And we know this old game that owners, let them fall apart and then, we have to pull it down now. Such a tragedy. Those kind of things we have to, really look at and go, this is not acceptable anymore. And it's been going on for a while. Social housing is always a big topic, and there are some interesting approaches how we can build more, how we can finance it better, run it better from other councillors that I want to understand better and learn better and then, help move forward. So there are these core issues that are always coming up with local councils.
Now, there are committees which you could try and join. Obviously, it'll be all changed because David Christian, of course, won't be council leader after August because he won't be standing. There'll be sort of a changing. Have you got an idea of which sort of committees you'd like to be part of? Or again, is this just trying to get in there, speak to people, get a feeling for where you might fit in first?
I do have some ideas and some interest in some areas, but I don't want to give too much away in terms of, where I really want to go. I want to really walk in first and meet everyone else, understand it better, see what's what. And because I might say, I want to join this committee now because I've got ideas. But then when I'm there, I see it's not what I thought it would be, or it does not run the way I thought it would be. I do try and do some preparation work now. So I read through every document I can find on the council website to understand the basics. So I don't walk in there fully unprepared. But other than that, I will just, see, okay, who's the best person to be there? What are the interests of other people, what they want to do, and where can we actually achieve something? I think there is a possibility of there being a considerable shift towards more green topics and towards councillors who maybe are more in support of these green topics. And they could well be, depending how the other elections go, more support for that kind of area. And that would be interesting to see. To have because green parties all over Europe are getting stronger, and I have seen the general sort of environmental movement over here become stronger. Just look at the trees, right? I mean, 40,000 people signed it. People went. So people want to look after this place, and it would be interesting if we have more of a council that's more leaning towards that rather than the traditional, not so green topics.
Well. On the green issues, I suppose it's connected. We hear that Douglas Council in the last 5 years, rates have been going up, spending's been difficult. Do you think you can achieve some of the successes on green issues like you're mentioning without money, I suppose?
Well, one of the good things is I took the... sorry, let me start again. Yeah. One of the good parts of not only living here, but in between living here, moving around the world, and then eventually coming back, is that I got to live in other countries and experience the way other governments do things. Most notably probably the Philippines, where things can be a bit mad, but things are also ahead of us in some other ways. So you can always pick up and learn things from other places and then try and bring them in because you had experiences elsewhere. And even though the Philippines won't strike you as the most environmental country there is, it's one of the biggest polluters. But they're trying to change, and they have very limited resources. So they become, quite inventive, and they have ways that, yes, there's always something you can do to make the place where you live cleaner, better, safer, without massive budgets or huge, project plans or whatever. And I do have some ideas, which I won't give away just yet. But yeah, I do definitely have some ideas that will not require much funding or no funding, but that I think would make a positive impact to the city.
Well, I have to ask you, of course, at Douglas South now, we have to talk about the area, the new constituency this time compared to the ward system of last time. Have you got any particular issues in Douglas South that you want to be looking at?
It does include a lot of the social housing areas, of course. And I used to live in Douglas South for most of the time over here. I don't do it at the moment. Please don't hate me for not living in the constituency. But I do know it well. I used to live there. I very much like the area. I know there's a lot of social housing there, and we need to look at the condition of it. We need to look at that we provide more. And we just need to look at that we have safe and healthy communities there, and that's mainly it. So there's nothing in there that I think is rocket science. It's all stable and basically enable people to have a happy and affordable life as well, because cost of living is a big issue over here, of course.
Faster Mai, hello and welcome to this edition of Agenda. I'm Ewan Gorn. There's going to be a changing of the guard at Douglas Council. Whatever the result of Thursday's local elections, 7 experienced councillors have called time on their careers at the Corpy, and with a reduction in the authority's overall numbers from 18 to 12, the arrival of fresh faces is certain. In Douglas South, though, 3 people were elected uncontested. They included the Housing Chair Claire Wells and new councillors Frank Scheungel and Stephen Krellin.
I'm not going to lie, it's been a year of agonising over whether or not I'll stay or whether I'll go. And one of the turning points for me was I was invited to go and look at one of our newly refurbished void properties. And I walked into this property and I thought, I'm part of this. This is because of my ambitions and my goals for housing, really, that this has come to fruition. And it was one of those precious moments where you think, I'm actually making a difference. So it was at that point that I thought, right, I'm going to stand. My family have had a big influence on that as well. My 2 boys couldn't quite understand why I didn't want to stand anymore, because, they weren't suffering, which is always a worry when you're in the public figure, or when you're in the public, should I say, that your family are suffering for that. So I've made a concerted effort really to stay out of the limelight, if we put it that way, so that my family don't suffer, and it appears to be working. But I am still making a difference, and that particular moment for me was a switch on where I thought, I am making a difference and I need to try and continue making that difference.
So you were housing chair. Would the intention be to continue to be housing chair if your colleagues chose you?
Well, I think you've just hit the nail on the head there, really. At the end of the day, it's down to whoever else comes in as a councillor, and we'll sit down and decide who sits where. And
but do you think experience is needed, though?
I think experience is needed for a lot of things when you're chairing anything or looking after stuff. Only because council is such a different thing to a normal day-to-day job, and working within the council or government in the same, everything's just slightly different, and there's so many hoops that you've got to jump through in order to get things working. Or it's taken me 5 years to get where I am today, and it's only in the last year, maybe 2, where the changes that we've implemented 3-4 years ago, you're starting to see. And it's been able to stay that test of time and understand that things don't happen overnight. And I think it does help. Experience helps. But it's also good to get fresh eyes in on things, because fresh ideas and that you can discuss, and you've got to be open to that from both sides.
There's been a friction in council, perhaps. Some might describe it as a friction. I don't know what your view is. With some of the newer councillors maybe challenging some of the councillors who've been there for a longer time. Is that healthy? Do you welcome that? Because some people don't seem to like it.
I think it's a mixed view. I think I definitely have a mixed view on that. I think there's friction just because of lack of understanding. And I always feel that when you're elected into a public service of any kind whatsoever, you have to be very aware of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how you're coming across to the public. Because whether you like it or not, you're not only representing the public, you're also representing the body that you are elected into.
But you are allowed to challenge that body you're allowed to challenge the executive as well, be part of it. Surely that's the dual role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you are able to challenge it. I think sometimes it's the way in which you challenge it which is brought into question. I'm not saying that the way it's being challenged at the moment is wrong. I just think you need to be aware that when you're going into something, you probably need a bit of time to find your own feet and understand how things work before you jump into the whole, well, you're doing it all wrong. You need to understand how it's been done first, why it's being done in that way. Me personally, I've done it. I've said things in council, and afterwards somebody's come and said, well, actually, Claire, this is why we do it the way we do it. And you get a completely different understanding. So for me, it's about stepping back, learning what the situation is, what you're challenging, and understanding what you're challenging. And if then you say, well, actually, you could be doing it better, or we should be looking at this, that, or the other, then I'm absolutely open to listening to what anybody's got to say. But really, I feel you've got to have an understanding first before you challenge anything.
Would you rather a fiery councillor that eventually got how the systems work rather than those who come in and don't actually want to challenge anything or change anything?
I think somewhere in the middle would be nice. I think somebody who is fiery but understanding and empathetic is what we're looking for. Well, me personally, what I would be looking for. I think there is an understanding that there are systems, there's rules and regulations, and you need to know that. You need to understand that before you go, well, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? I'm not a particularly aggressive person. I'm definitely much calmer than I was when I was first a council member. I think the leader, Councillor Christian, would definitely bring up the whole foot stomping episode, which was in council.
Go on, what happened?
I got really upset in a council meeting once where we were looking at a rent increase, which obviously we have no control over. But I was trying to make the point that we needed a rent increase in order to improve the housing. And I can't remember the exact things that were being said, but I got really upset about it. At one point, stood up and stomped my feet, and I just said, "Nobody's listening to what I'm trying to, my point that I'm trying to get across." And I'm sure that's one he will remind me of in many years to come. But I've learned as time goes on that there is always a reason for something, and when you understand that reason, then you are in a position to question that reason. But until you know it, and until you take the time to understand it and learn how things are, that's what you need to be doing.
Can you flip that on its head though and say that being pulled into the structures and the bureaucracy and the real way things really get done, instead of looking at the whole system and going, hang on, the system isn't working for us here, you actually go into that system, and rather than challenge the whole thing, you end up working within those processes?
No, I don't actually believe that at all. I think you've got to understand the processes in order to challenge the processes, because you can't challenge something if you don't understand it. And until you understand it, then you can challenge it. And it's taken me many years to understand how the housing processes work. And we're now in a very strong position, and we have been challenging those processes quite rigorously over the past few years. And it shows, and empowering our staff to do things differently. And we have changed processes, but it's taken a while to understand why they did the things they did before and allowing them to do things differently.
I have to ask you about, you mentioned the council leader, David Christian. He's not going to be there. Yeah. What impact is that going to have? I mean, he seemed to be so embedded. He seemed to be, perhaps maybe to the detriment of other councils at times, the face and the executive, and he would seem to be doing everything. How much of a loss is that going to be?
I think the loss of the leader of the council is going to be felt quite dramatically. There is no person I know who knows the council and Douglas and loves Douglas as much as David Christian does. You can ask him anything and he will have a story about it and why they've done the things they've done. There is a lot of stuff on social media about people who don't like him and are pleased that he's leaving, but I don't think they understand exactly how much he has done for Douglas as a whole. He was talking yesterday in council about the fact that he promoted central heating in our houses, and one of the MHKs at the time turned around and said, well, they can just put an extra jumper on, they don't need central heating. Little things like that, which people, well, that's not actually a little thing, that's a massive thing really, but things like that he has been instrumental in doing. We have a reserve account within council now, which we're able to dip into if we need to, which we needed to during COVID, which wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for Councillor Christian. All these things, he's always doing things for the better of Douglas, and not everybody agrees with that. You can't make everybody happy, but I think his knowledge and his love for what he does will be sorely missed within the council. I'm going to miss him personally. He's been a great mentor to me. He's always been somebody that I've been able to lean on and challenge. We've had our challenging times. I've challenged him and he's challenged me, and we've had a lot of laughs, and I am going to miss that.
From the outside, he seems like somebody who knows how to play the game, both within working with officers in the local authority and with government. Perhaps he seems like he's probably, and he's been there for so long, wise to the ways of the world in terms of politics. Will the council not be initially perhaps as strong as it was with him in the coming term, do you think, as a result of not having his experience there?
I think strength is really in the people that are coming in. And so, yes, we're going to lose some of his expertise, but it's really down to the integrity of the people that are coming in and their ability to stand by their beliefs and challenge the issues that we come across. So although I understand your question and are we going to be, I don't think we'll be less strong than when David was there. I just think that his knowledge and his ability to pinpoint an issue so quickly may be slightly lost. However, anybody that comes in, as long as they stand by their morals and are willing to challenge in the right way, I think there is a way forward on that.
Would you be willing to be the council leader? Because some see housing as it's a big responsibility in Douglas because, they're the largest housing provider. Some might see you as maybe a natural successor then to the council leader. What would you say to that?
I think at the end of the day, it's down to the members to choose who they want to lead them.
Would you be interested if they were interested in you?
I'm not really sure that it's something I can answer, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be a very difficult position to fill. I think you're in the public eye a lot, and you need a particular personality, I think, to be able to carry that role off. Whether or not the members that come in choose me as their leader or anybody else who comes in, that's really up to them to decide.
Well, we want to talk about challenges now. COVID has been a big challenge on everyone's lives, but the council has had other challenges with, creating a reserve fund, which it didn't have, updating housing stock, one you know about very well. What are the big challenges in the next few? Are they the same challenges, just carrying on with them, or are there new things on the horizon?
Yeah, I think housing is always going to be a challenge, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, we have got the biggest housing stock, the oldest housing stock as well. And with the climate as it is at the moment, because of COVID and Brexit to a certain degree as well, costs are rising quite dramatically. But that doesn't mean people's wages are rising or the income we're getting is rising, but we have to meet those costs. So trying to keep up with the kind of standards that we're trying to put in place, that is really difficult. But that also goes into all the other things that we do as a council. So anything that you talk about, any improvements you want to do, investments that you want to do within the town, it is going to be difficult because at the end of the day, costs are going up daily. You just talk about the cost of wood. Somebody's told me it's gone up 40%. That it's quite a big impact. And when you're wanting to improve your town continuously and always invest in it, you have to. That is a big challenge for us. But you then have to balance that with the fact that you have the understanding that people who live within the town, their wages aren't going up, and you can't just slap on a massive big increase into their rates. I know that the first thing that's going to come out when people listen to this is, oh, but you increase our rates every year, blah, 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 blah. But if anybody actually takes the time to look at the increases, you'll see that, for the most part, they are below RPI. And they're also actually kept quite minimal compared to, I don't know how we did it this year, if I'm perfectly honest. Yes, there was an increase, but it was quite a small increase compared to what I thought we were going to be at, and I think what we were aiming for. And that's really down to the hard work of the officers and trying to make sure that we really are getting the best that we can out of the money that we get. And it is absolutely scrutinised down to the last £5. It really is looked at. And we've done that for year on year. I mean, I've been a council member for 6 years now, and every year there's cuts here and cuts there. And I think it's getting to the point now that, there's very little more that can be shaved off.
That was newly elected Claire Wells, who was returned uncontested in the ward. That's all from this programme, and that's my last edition of Agenda for Manx Radio. You can listen again as a podcast via the Manx Radio website or through Spotify, and I'd like to thank you all for listening over my time on the show. But for now, go Ramayu and goodbye.